Story 1. No matter how much they paid, it is going to cover a lot for me. I can think of some really big numbers, though not all. Those divers who swam underwater through a cave system to rescue kids? I would rather cut off my legs. Story 2. Portable toilet cleaner at music festivals. The smell alone could be overwhelming. Add in intoxicated individuals and heat. I'm done. Story 3. A nurse. The blood, bodily fluids, and the mindset and toughness they endure are qualities I do not possess. I have immense respect and love for the dedicated nurses in this world. Story 4. Delivering Pepsi in the summertime involves dollying bottles up concrete stairs to stores in 40-degree weather, while navigating through crazy rush-hour traffic all day. No way. Story 5. I worked as a lifeguard for a summer, and after witnessing people die, I will never return, even for a paycheck. It is traumatizing when a child drowns and the parents are screaming while the body is being taken away. Some individuals were disrespectful enough to try to take pictures with their cell phones as if it were a spectacle. This experience drastically changed my view of humanity. People wanted videos and pictures while family members were grieving. I have never seen humanity the same since that day. Story 6. Telemarketing. I worked in a rendering plant, a slaughterhouse, unclogged septic systems, and spent all day picking vegetables. I will never do a job that requires talking on the phone and handling money again. Story 7. One of the toughest jobs I have ever witnessed is performed by people in extremely impoverished areas who strip down and climb into waste holes to clean them out at night. Story 8. I would only avoid activities that have a very high chance of causing serious harm or injury to myself. I agreed with some of the options presented, but when I looked at the prostitution post, I realized I have a price for nearly everything. If I were offered an exorbitant amount of money, I might consider it, as it wouldn't require me to do it for long. Additionally, I would not accept a job that involved harming others or ruining innocent lives, unless I could be so ineffective that I would not cause any actual harm. Story 9. Working in the music industry can be challenging. Some individuals in this field lack respect for others. Story 10. There needs to be a maximum amount that one could be paid, because if we are discussing 8 figures, there is not much I would not do. Story 11. I would never work in healthcare insurance claims. Having to deny people life-saving care every day would break me mentally. Story 12. I don't think such a job exists if you are putting no limitations on pay. For $20 million per day, I will do anything for a week. Story 13. I will not try to prevent people from obtaining better benefits for themselves, their jobs, and their families. Story 14. Dentist or surgeon. Given that I've fainted after cutting my leg while shaving and had to lie down after seeing someone bleed from a small head wound, I'm not sure I would classify this as a job I would never do versus a job I would never be able to do. Story 15. I'm sure there's something, but I can't recall it right now, mainly because there are no limits to this question. If I were to be paid $1 million per hour, I would do almost anything for an hour or two and then quit. If the amount were raised to even more outrageous figures, absolutely, my morality is for sale. I'm not even going to pretend otherwise. Story 16. Animal euthanasia technician at shelters. I was offered 3 times my current salary, but I'm already emotional about it. I volunteer at shelters and can barely handle seeing the sick animals, let alone being the one to euthanize them. Some jobs come with an emotional cost that is too high. Story 17. Law enforcement of any kind, individuals working on an oil rig, fishermen on reality shows, rescue divers, child protective services, or any social work related to abused or neglected children, slaughterhouse workers, veterinarians who struggle with euthanizing animals, and politicians. Story 18. Applied behavior analysis therapist. I have heard numerous horror stories of individuals permanently affected by their experiences, and I cannot ethically claim that I wouldn't make mistakes. At the entry level, a registered behavior technician only requires a high school diploma and 40 hours of training. For neurotypical children, a bachelor's degree is the minimum requirement for youth counseling, although most pursue a master's degree to become fully licensed to practice therapy. Story 19. I think you severely underestimate most people's limits when it comes to vast amounts of wealth. I can't think of a legitimate job I wouldn't consider, at least for a short time, if the pay was measured in the tens of millions, let alone higher. I can think of actions I wouldn't take for any amount, but not proper jobs. It would be too life-changing to not temporarily set aside my morals, values, self-worth, fears, dislikes, etc. Now, if we were talking about jobs I wouldn't do even for quadruple the top-end normal pay, I would list tasks like working with terminally ill children or caring for elderly or disabled individuals who can't perform basic tasks, or dealing with medical procedures like draining abscesses. Some tasks are either too depressing, soul-crushing, or disgusting to be worth even quadruple pay. But for any price, I would consider doing even those tasks for at least a little while. Story 20. I don't think I could be a nurse. I find it difficult to clean another person's bottom. I struggled with changing my children's diapers. I have great respect for nurses. Just the thought of cleaning another person makes me uncomfortable. Story 21. Anything that involves heights. I would not be able to function well enough to do the job, regardless of the money offered. Story 22. All of these answers are so unconvincing. You would all do these jobs for $300,000 per year, regardless of the amount. Story 23. Border agents or any part of the Trump administration. Initiating destruction from within might be a good idea. Story 24. Probably the person who changes the light bulbs at the tops of cell towers. It is a lucrative job, but that would be the hardest no for me. Story 25. Full-time coding. I am 3 years into a computer science degree, so there is no backing out now. Story 26. Anything where I have to kill something unless it was military. I have always wanted to be a fighter pilot. Story 27. Coal mining. Being deep underground is terrifying. Bent over and doing manual labor for over 8 hours a day feels like hell on earth. Story 28. Custodian and janitor. I have the utmost respect for them, but I'm not suited for the things they have to see and clean up. Story 29. Doctor, I apologize, but I just don't have the stomach for half of what they have to do, or the memory for that matter. I would be the worst. Story 30. Parking enforcement. Your sole purpose is to report on people on behalf of the government or private interests. You generate revenue for someone else, leaving you feeling empty. I have extreme disdain for these individuals. Your life means nothing, and your job doesn't contribute to the greater good. Story 31. Medical representative. Specifically, I'm thinking of the representatives that help surgeons. They are wholly dependent on having a doctor who wants to use their product, a patient who is healthy enough for surgery and does not get canceled for some reason, and parts availability. If the surgeon goes on vacation, then that's days you're not getting paid. If the doctor switches companies or retires, you might be out of a job because they do not need your position anymore if there isn't a replacement doctor. Even if they paid me $1 million a month, it would not be worth the stress of wondering if I have a job today. Story 32. Cold call sales. I did it for a few months right after graduating college. I hated it so much that it threw me into a depression and made me consider self-harm for the first time in my life. Story 33. I have a friend who used to work creating videos for funerals. It may not sound too difficult until you consider that not all funerals are for elderly individuals who passed away from illness. Some are for children, some of whom died tragically. Since becoming a parent, I have become very sensitive to the idea of young ones dying. The question in the post is a bit vague. For example, would I create funeral videos for $100 million a week? Sure, but realistically, it is not a job I would want to take on. I do not want to assemble slideshows of pictures of a 5-year-old who just passed away. No, that is not for me. Story 34. Anything involving child abuse investigations, especially those related to sexual abuse, is incredibly difficult. I believe those fighting for justice for these children are true heroes, but I do not have the emotional capacity for it. My mind would struggle to process such trauma. Anyone in this line of work deserves significant compensation for the intense experiences they must repeatedly confront. Story 35. Chef. I completed my education in this field and started to dislike it while in school. I am now in a completely different job, and I would never change how I spend my free time. Additionally, for a woman, at least in my area, It is much harder to gain recognition, and I did not want to waste my life on it. Story 36. Possibly a bull rider. I don't know if I would risk paralysis or death even once to be secure for the rest of my life. Story 37. My husband and I joke about this all the time. I am a social worker and he is a machinist. He has said that there is not enough money in the world to convince him to talk to people for a living. Meanwhile, if my boss ever asked me to do trigonometry for work, I would probably just sit on the ground and cry. Story 38. Prepared for downvotes, but as a parent influencer, no amount of money is worth the trauma and danger you are putting your children through. Story 39. Sewer worker. The thought of being down there in the morning when people are getting up and getting ready makes me retch. Story 40. Crime scene cleanup can be challenging. I assisted my friend in packing up her grandmother's apartment after her passing, and that was difficult enough emotionally. I cannot imagine doing that type of work with traumatic scenes day after day. Story 41. For me, it would be one of the people who climb those large radio and television towers to change the light bulbs at the top. That is absolutely a non-starter for me. Story 42. Banking made me feel worse about myself when I was pressured to sell people predatory loans and credit cards. Story 43. Slaughterhouse. I know I'm a hypocrite because I eat meat, so I can't pretend to be morally good, but I couldn't do it. Story 44. Working in a restaurant kitchen. I don't understand how someone could enjoy making food for others all day, every day. Story 45. Nurse or personal support worker. I know many nurses and personal support workers, and they have extremely physically and emotionally demanding jobs that I don't think most people could handle. I'm not very good with people or high-stress working environments or odd working hours, to be honest. Even if I received 10 times what nurses make in my country, I wouldn't take that job because it would destroy my mental health and sleep schedule. Nurses and personal support workers have my utmost respect and sympathy. When I spent 6 weeks in the hospital, it was the nurses who actually helped me heal, not the doctor I saw once a week who couldn't even remember my name. Story 46. Except for jobs that involve hurting people, I would do basically anything for any amount because any amount can be 100 million an hour. Story 47. Emergency room nurse or doctor. At least when I am stressed at my current job or make a mistake, I can say, it's not like we are saving lives here. I could not handle that kind of pressure. Story 48. Anything that would have a high chance of killing me instantly. If I got paid $1 billion for an hour, I could do something terrible for 1 hour and then leave. Story 49. Being a teacher, I feel awful for all of you. You are trying to shape the youth for the future, and from what I see in teacher communities, they treat you poorly. Story 50. My friend used to work as a pig farm hand, and for any amount of money, I could not come home smelling like that every day. Story 51. I took legal action against the city for repeatedly breaking the law. I won, but I would never want to know how the system operates. I would never work in government again. Story 52. Any kind of manual farming for extended periods is challenging. My legs feel more useless than an empty bag of chips and give out after about 10 minutes. Story 53. A lawyer is a profession that requires individuals to make decisions that can significantly impact others, potentially causing real harm if the wrong choice is made. Story 54. Harvesting cranberries is not something I would recommend. If you haven't seen how it's done and what occurs during the process, I suggest looking it up. Story 55. Answer: Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agent. For me, it would have to be Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agent. These agents are human too, and many experience real emotional turmoil from pulling people away from their lives and communities. The masks they wear hide not just faces but also significant internal conflict and stress. When they move quickly during an operation, it is often about containing a situation rather than being heartless. Story 56. Boxer or any sport that requires me to physically confront someone. But let's be real, there are many jobs I wouldn't do for any amount. President, politician, contract killer, server, religious leader, roofer, police officer, jailer, judge, executioner, bank robber, parole officer, sex worker, caddy, professional golfer, airport security staff, drug dealer. I'm sure this list could include more jobs, but for a brief moment, these are the obvious ones that come to mind. Story 57. Conversion therapy and most forms of the troubled youth industry, particularly the abusive ones, are unacceptable. Story 58. Underwater welding can lead to severe illnesses and premature deaths. The Byford dolphin incident highlights these dangers. Decompression was not performed properly, resulting in multiple people being severely harmed due to the pressure difference. Story 59. Probably a police officer or a position with a similar level of power and responsibility. I disagree with many aspects of the ever-changing legal system. Due to my strong sense of justice, I wouldn't be able to follow orders I was morally opposed to, no matter how good the benefits are. I couldn't in good conscience claim to be an advocate for free speech while joining a group that arrests people for their speech, for example. I'm sure other countries have a more trustworthy law enforcement system, but where I live, we don't agree on many issues. Story 60. Anything related to police, fire, medical, or sewage had a taste of it with a heating and plumbing company a couple of years ago. I have no restaurant work experience, as I had a sample of it during a first job trial in Germany. Story 61. No matter how much they paid you. Come on. For $1 million, I would do almost anything. Even for $100,000. Probably even for $10,000. Exceptions: Einsatzgruppenmember, executioner, Russian soldier, suicide bomber. Story 62. Being the individual from the George W. Bush administration whose job was to say, "No, Mr. President. It is nuclear." Story 63. I'm never going back to nursing. I'm old school paper charting from the intensive care unit era. Watching the healthcare industry consume itself with technology has been sad. Story 64. I would do almost anything for enough money. While I may not excel at many jobs and would dislike several of them, money is a significant motivator. I don't mind dirty jobs, but working in a slaughterhouse would be awful. Being a corrections officer would be challenging for me due to my anxiety, and being a police officer would also be difficult, though I hope I wouldn't be a negative influence in that role. Customer service is tough for me because I struggle to understand people and feel anxious when I can't assist them effectively. Story 65. The soldiers who are forced to kill or torture dissenters and criminals in certain countries, such as North Korea, may not even receive compensation. I would be left emotionally drained. Story 66. I will never consider working for Walmart again. That company is poorly managed in the way they treat their employees in the warehouses. Story 67. Truck driver in the U.S. The thought of sitting and driving alone in my truck all day on highways and city streets is horrific. I don't know how they do it. Kudos and respect to all truck drivers out there. Story 68. Work in an abattoir and have worked in meat factories for about 20 years. The individuals in the killing halls face challenging conditions. The compensation for that job does not reflect the effort involved. Story 69. Proctologist. The police officers who must knock on people's doors at 2 a.m. to inform them that a family member has been involved in a fatal car accident are theoretically trained to handle the trauma of delivering such devastating news to a complete stranger. However, I honestly don't know how they cannot ultimately be affected somewhere down the line, regardless of how much they believe they are coping at the time. Obviously, someone has to perform this part of the job, but I really don't think I could carry out that responsibility, no matter the financial compensation. Story 70. I used to work in management consulting, and I was part of a team that recommended firing employees. That was not for me. I didn't have to sit there and tell people they were fired, but we were figuring out who should be let go. I transitioned to growth immediately, and in that situation, the business need made sense. However, working for Elon Musk's company, where you're firing people without justification in essential roles, is not for me. You couldn't pay me to fire employees who save lives and provide food to others. I refuse to do that. It is callous and malicious, and honestly, there's no valid reason for it. Story 71. Anything related to working in a factory involves risks. I have heard of numerous accidents and machine-related fatalities. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.